Hi, good morning.
Hey, Janae, how are you?
I'm doing great. I was hoping that you could introduce yourself, and I wanted to talk to you about physician mental health and healthcare systems. One of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you was that I know you've done work with healthcare systems on creating solutions, and um, mental health is a huge issue right now, but it's always been a huge issue. For people watching as background, like we met before a lot of the stuff that's happening with the current pandemic. And Dr. DeChant has always been involved in physician mental health. And he's worked with healthcare systems on transformation. So I wanted to get his opinion on practical things that people can do, but also kind of um, a historical view of what's going on. So do you want to introduce yourself, or do you want, you
Yeah,
probably better go.
I can just jump in and, kind of as I introduce myself, give that historical view as well. So I'm a family physician. I practiced for 25 years. During that time, I also had gradually increasing roles in management in healthcare systems around the country. And I got into management not because I felt I needed to be a leader, but because when things didn't go right in my office and I had a bad day, I wanted to fix those things. And so I spoke up. And I would then get invited to be on a committee, then to chair a committee, become a medical director. And ultimately, over the course of that time, I worked in a number of different places. I worked with the Palo Alto Medical Clinic in Fremont, California from 84 to 93. I then got an offer out of the blue to join a small practice in the mountains in Breckenridge, Colorado.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so we moved there with our 3 and 1 year old daughters. And from 94 to 2001, I was a small town family doctor and the ER doctor at the base of the ski hill, but also during that time, merged a number of small practices together into a 30 provider group. I also got my MBA then, and then got an opportunity to work at Geisinger, which is in central Pennsylvania, quite well-known health system, particularly progressive. And in 2002, started working there, running a department of 20 docs, but also started Epic. We went live with Epic 2 weeks after I got there.
What part of it? So, John went to Geisinger Medical School. It was
Oh,
at the time. Yeah.
uh-huh.
So what part, where were you?
Oh, so I was in in primary care in Lewistown, which is
Okay.
about an hour and a half from Danville, the main center of Geisinger.
And we were in
And
Scranton. So,
oh yeah. So I spent some time up in Scranton. I ended up getting involved in leadership of the whole community practice part, which is the primary care group. And actually, I ran the Epic Optimization Committee for Geisinger because Epic went live and there was no optimization committee. There were some good, some good technicians that were really helping us learn well, the trainers, but there was no physician involvement in optimizing Epic. And I was spending hours at night falling asleep on the keyboard trying to get my notes done. And it's like, there's got to be a better way. So,
right.
so that, so I've lived that whole experience, which people still live today. And I actually ran the compensation committee for the primary care group of about 200 physicians at the time who were scattered all over central and northeastern Pennsylvania. Then I got an offer to come back to Palo Alto Clinic and open new offices in a different part of the Northern California. And that sounded great to us at the time. So we came back to Northern California. I started up an office brand new, hired new physicians, and built it. Really had a first opportunity to put lean into practice. I was gradually learning that this opportunity to fix the workflows and make our day go better.
You do lean. I feel like we have to take a moment because everybody that does lean loves it, right? It's like it's a club.
Well, I'll get to it. I'll talk about
the first solution for everyone is that you have to join the club. You pick one. One of them's lean.
Well, yeah, we'll get there. So I actually not even, I was kind of learning about lean, but it just made sense to me if I was going to design an office, I could design it so it worked well for the people who worked there. And this particular space that they got was a shell that had floor to ceiling windows all around. And most offices, the doctors get the offices around the outside, and the staff are stuck in the middle where it's all much darker, and the patients are sitting in this nice windowed area of a waiting room, but then everybody else is in the dark in the back. And it just occurred to me, if we could put all the docs and staff together around the outside of the building in cubicles, we could have a hallway where the staff sat at the end of the hallway and could look straight down the hall, see what was going on. The docs could be in cubes on either side of them, have some privacy, but also be able to just talk to each other to, address issues as it came up during the day. That worked out really well. And people to this day really like that approach. The waiting room was in the middle of the building. It did not have natural light coming in, but patients, when we run it right, patients don't spend much time in the waiting room. So that's the least value add really for the system. So anyway, that's where I really started to learn these approaches. I was also experimenting with team-based care at that time. And that was a pretty new idea in Palo Alto. There were people who pushed back against that, said, it might not be safe. Of course, now everybody's trying to do this, but this was in the early 2000s. Then I got actually it was 2005 to 2009. I got the opportunity to become CEO of a different part of Sutter Health, the Sutter Gould Medical Foundation, which is a 300 physician group in the Central Valley of California, Modesto and Stockton. Now, those are not, I don't know if you know Modesto or Stockton, but every time we would try to hire a doctor and their spouse would go into Wikipedia to look up Modesto or Stockton, they realized, oh, this is not a place I may not want to live.
They're like, no thanks.
Yeah. It's hot, it's flat, it's poor, and it's like the car theft capital of the world. So
it is? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And in
You moved
2009,
from Philly. No, you weren't in Philly, but you moved from
well,
Philly.
there's like, it's in the top 10. Both of those are in the top 10. In 2009, when I went there and became CEO, this was right at the height of the Great Recession. And so, unemployment in our area was like 18 to 20% compared to about 9 to 10% in the rest of the country. And our staff, many of them were, most of the frontline staff were women whose partners or spouses had been in construction and lost their jobs. So people were really struggling. And also at that time, I went to a conference 2 weeks after I started the job. I'd already been scheduled to go to it. The American Medical Group Association puts these on, and people from Theta Care presented about what they had done to use Lean to redesign their primary care offices. And I realized this is what I want to do. So I talked to the people who put that on, who presented that. And then I got connected with them, actually went out to Theta Care to see the work they were doing, started working with the same consulting group that worked with Theta Care. Their name is Simpler. And we began this transformation. We built it on a theme of returning joy to patient care, but it was a transformation that focused on redesigning the workflow to reduce the work burden and changing the management system so that we really could empower people as close to the front line as possible while aligning everyone around the enterprise-wide success. And it worked, and better than I really expected it. I kind of knew what I was getting into conceptually, but I didn't know, details of how to do it. With the help from the consultants, we listened to what they said, we did the work, and 5 years later, we got recognized by Consumer Reports in the California Healthcare Performance System as the top performer out of 170 groups in the state 2 years in a row. And we moved our physician satisfaction from the 45th up to the 87th percentile.
45th is bad.
So 45th, it's median. It's not terrible. I mean, there's plenty of places that are obviously
worse.
Yeah, 45% of places are worse, but it's not great. And we were able to
really like what you said about like empowering people on the front lines, because I feel like that's actually trickier than. That's easy to say. Yeah. It's actually really tricky to do, give everyone that decision-making power and the tools they need right there.
It's real. I don't think it's so much tricky when you understand how to do it. It's that most people don't know how to do it, or they're not comfortable doing it. For me as a physician, man, I wanted to have control over my office, my flow, my staff, how to get things done, because I knew every problem I ran into, I could see a solution for. I just couldn't implement it. So I wanted to have that autonomy, that authority, that control. But as a CEO, it scared the crap out of me to think I've got 300 doctors that are going to do whatever they want to do. The place is going to fall apart through entropy because everybody's going to be doing their own thing. So that's why it takes this combination of empowerment and alignment. And when we put those together in the right way, then it really works. And that alignment isn't imposed top down. It's something that people collaboratively come together and say, yes, these are the ways we agree that will achieve quality care, that will make sure, our patients feel well cared for, that they're satisfied, that will create access, that will make sure all the staff are well taken care of. That's not something that can get imposed top down, but it is something that collectively can work really well. Doctors and nurses, and actually frontline staff for that matter, are amazing knowledge workers. A knowledge worker is someone, the two things about knowledge workers, one is they have to be solving problems on a continuous basis throughout the day on their job. And so they need some control and authority to do that. Secondly, really high level knowledge workers, they know more about the work they do than their manager does. And so you have to manage it a different way. You can't come in and say, well, I've done this job for 20 years. I know how to do it. I'm going to tell you how to do it. Because even myself as a physician CEO, I'm a family doctor. I couldn't tell the ophthalmologist or the OBGYN or the neurosurgeon how to do their job. I have, the ideas around how do we provide care, I knew, but I didn't know the best way to provide those specialty care. So that's how this is so important, to build it in a way where people are aligned, empowered, but connected to each other and recognize that. And so that's really what my journey had been. After 5 years of leading that transformation, I then got an offer from the consulting company that I'd hired to come work for them as a coach for C-level leaders in healthcare systems that they're serving around the country. So working with the CEO, chief medical officer, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, helping them understand this so they could do their role appropriately.
Right. And I feel like a lot of the times when we talk to leaders, they say, you can talk about empowerment and alignment, but what does that actually look like? Even now, people are like, how do you actually lead these teams when they're remote? What does that mean? Like, what does that mean in terms of quality metrics? What does that mean in terms of billing, stuff like that?
Yes. Yeah. So, and there is this, so let's talk about how to do that. People think that lean is mostly about redesigning workflow and taking waste out of the steps involved in getting anything done. And that's an important component of it. And it makes a huge difference. But it's not the only component, because quite often people take that approach. They think that's what it's about. And you will have people come in and say, well, here's a best practice that was done in St. Elsewhere, so you guys should just do that here. And then your problems will be solved. Well, St. Elsewhere is—
I bet that goes great.
Yeah. Well, it's elsewhere. It's not here. And so things are not the same, whether it's the culture of the community, the design of the building, the nature of the people that are on the staff, the nature of the patients. There's so many things that are different. The concepts often in a best practice somewhere else are right, but they have to be adapted to that particular location. They can't be just rigidly adopted as is. And that a lot of that creativity of taking a good idea and adapting it to work well in your location is also a key philosophy of lean. The part of lean that most people aren't aware of is that there's a whole management approach, which is based on two key principles. One is respect for people, which is recognizing that, in fact, Toyota talks about, we don't really build cars. The first thing we do is we build people. We develop people so they can become great problem solvers. They can utilize their full potential. And it's the management system that allows them to do that. So the management in lean has three key components to it. The first is called strategy deployment. It's where the top level leaders set the strategy for the organization and get real clarity. All right, what are we about? What's our mission and our vision and our values? How do we then translate those into actually providing care to patients? Do we focus on cardiovascular or musculoskeletal or neurology? Do we focus on primary care? If we do, is it going to be fee for service or value-based care? What is and what geography are we going to work in? What demographic of patients are we going for? All of those things need to get decided at the top, but then they get deployed out locally. And in the deployment process, as you know, from the C-level leader, they deploy to a VP or a director. The director deploys to a manager who deploys to the front lines. And with each of those steps towards the front lines, it's important that the person who's receiving this new direction, that they actually have the capacity to deliver on the request, that they have the time, they have the resources, and they have the support that they might need other support services like finance or IT or HR or whatever to do it. But many organizations, they'll just deploy and tell the next level down, go do this, but they haven't gone through that conversation asking, do you have the capability you need in order to be successful?
Right.
And that's a key lean philosophy.
I think you can really tell too when organizations don't work that way. Like you can tell when the office staff hates their job, or when they hate the leadership, when they're like, well, we have to do this for billing, or, well, we don't do that at this location. Well, why did someone send you here? And like, it's easier to see. Sometimes it's easier to see for patients. Like it's easier to see from the outside. They're like, okay, well, than it is to see within an organization. And I think about that a lot in general, like with work. Sometimes when you're in it, it's hard to see.
Yeah, you get real tunnel vision into your thing that you've got to deal with.
Yeah. But in healthcare, it's really obvious to patients. Like we say, we say it down, but like, have you ever gone to a physician that's like, well, our health group doesn't let us do that. Well, blah, blah. They talk about like, I've literally been in doctor's appointments when they've been talking about how the organization has switched and that impacts their job. And I'm literally like, why are you telling me this? Like,
so why they're telling you that is because they don't have the control, that they've lost, that control has been taken away from them. And, autonomy is important to us as physicians. I mean, that's why we go through decade plus of training, is because we need to be able to take control when the time it calls for it. So one of the things I discovered, and very briefly, the other key component in lean is a daily huddle, which many places do daily huddles. So it's not unique to lean, but in a lean daily huddle, the way I like to see them, there's a few key things. First of all, they never last more than 15 minutes. So they're not taking over the day, but everybody should attend. Secondly, they're ideally done standing up at a visual management board. If they're in one site, if everybody's together in the same place, everybody should come together physically in one location and look at a board, which has a number of things on it. First of all, it has some reward and recognition for people who did a great job yesterday, because everybody thrives on that recognition.
Hopefully it has good looking Post-it notes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Post-it notes, absolutely. We use those for many things.
And I started my career in teaching, so I like.
There you go. Yeah.
You can get, they teach you how to write on those boards. Like the boards are important.
Yeah. Well, the second thing we do is we prepare for the day. Do we have the capacity to meet the demand that's coming at us? Is either the census for the unit or the schedule for the office, do we have the staff we need? Is the equipment working? Do we have the supplies we need? And if we don't, that's okay. But then we can start to develop contingencies at the beginning of the day rather than getting surprised by that in the middle of the day.
I bet that became a big thing during COVID, like when.
They'd
be like, well, do we have PPE? No. Do we know what's going to happen? Also, no.
Right. You get it.
They're like, no, and no on that, and also understaffed.
Yeah. And then with PPE, and so then the third component is problem solving. What little thing went wrong yesterday that just ticked you off, that you said, I don't ever want to let this happen again? You open a drawer and what you need is not there in the drawer. You go to the printer and it's out of paper. It messes up your day. They're little things. They're not something where you're going to shut the clinic down until you fix the problem. But you also, you say, I don't want to ever let this happen again. And you're sure you're going to bring this up. And then by the end of the day, you've been so overwhelmed with so many things, you forget about it. And you don't even think about it again until it happens again a week later or a month later. And then you're even more upset about it. And
I think it's relatable for everyone that's ever had a job.
Yeah. This doesn't apply only to healthcare. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But if at that moment that thing happens, you grab that sticky note and you put it on the huddle board and say, this is a problem I want to talk about tomorrow. Then you remember tomorrow at the huddle to talk about it. And if the team says, yeah, we all agree that's a problem, then you can have a couple of people start working on a solution and come back a week later with some idea to fix it. So these are little pebble in your shoe kind of problems. They're not the big boulder in the road, But if we have so many little pebbles in our shoes, if we can gradually take those out, our journey gets a lot easier because we're not carrying all of that weight and dealing with all of that pain. And then lastly, metrics. The metrics at a system level around quality, safety, patient satisfaction, access, financial performance, productivity, our own human well-being. All of those every system has a dashboard with those metrics on them. But the result, the actual outcomes that get reported are the result of the work that's happening on the front lines every day at the point of patient care. And so at the point of patient care, we may not be measuring patient satisfaction specifically. We might be measuring, how well were we able to, did we have the capacity to greet our patient appropriately? Or with safety, did we have the time to do medication reconciliation or to wash our hands or whatever it is? It's all those little things that are processes that we do that result in the outcomes at the system level. And when the organization agrees, these are the things that are important, and people at the front lines need an opportunity to agree as well, then they can start to work on those process measures and working on those.
Easy though, because I wonder about, I don't want to interrupt here, but I've talked to a lot of physicians who say we have all these metrics. They're, whether that be CMS metrics, like whatever they are, quality metrics, they're like, it has nothing to do with my job. Right. And, the quality officers, they have a hard job, or physicians on the front line are saying, well, why do they think this is important? Like, why are they measuring? Like, why am I taking my time to do this? So, we have to talk about buy-in, and maybe that's a different conversation, but,
no, it absolutely, because it comes back to this whole issue of control and values alignment. And so with the metrics in the frontline huddles, there should never be more than 5 total that site's working on. And you should really just look at one each day. Most of, CMS and other insurers have created hundreds of metrics for people to try to follow.
There are endless metrics. There's I like data science. I like visualization. I'm like, oh, tell me about the dashboard. Like, how much can people see? Like,
yeah, exactly. And but it's impossible. We can't pay attention to 100 things. You can't do 100 things well. You got to focus. And so if we pick one metric a day, we're going to focus on. If we're doing great on that metric, we don't even need to spend time on it in that huddle. But if we're not at the target, then we can start to problem solve around how do we move towards achieving the target that we've got. And the metrics shouldn't be, again, as much as possible, they should be designed collaboratively rather than just being imposed from the top. Now, that at the top, the decision might be, yes, we want to have our access at, our third next available appointment is one way to measure that. Should be at, 3 days for an acute appointment and 2 weeks for a chronic appointment, whatever. How that it gets
achieved 5 months for a new patient. It's fine.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the problem. How that gets achieved at the front lines, the people at the C-suite really don't know how to do that. It's the people on the front lines that know how to do things where they can decide, how do we create extra room in the schedule? How can we make decisions about whether we hold spaces available for the day or not? Do things like that. So it's there's this process as you get closer to the front lines where you move from the outcome metric more towards process metrics, and you can actually achieve the goals. What I do want to talk about before I forget is the relationship between burnout and lean. And what I came to realize was that lean actually, when done right, is the antidote to burnout. When it's done wrong, it can make burnout worse. If people come in with lean and say, we're going to hit these targets, and and I'm going to tell you how to do it, that makes burnout worse. But right. I was so fortunate through the course of the work that I did as CEO.
I feel like that's important. I feel like we should, that's actually really important, because people come and talk to me and say, well, what's one thing you would do to improve physician mental health? And I'm like, well, I don't know that we can actually, people want a solution.
Yeah.
So even with lean,
and the thing, and with physician, with the world of burnout, once I left the CEO role and got into my consulting role, and I started to really formulate these ideas and understand them better. And I started going to the American Conference on Physician Health meetings back in the 2014, 15. Mm-hmm. I realized the focus in those meetings primarily back then was on enhancing personal resilience. And, I knew in my gut then, and now we actually have studies demonstrating it, that physicians are some of the most resilient people in the world. You know, how many people have to pass organic chemistry just to be able to apply for the school, to get into the school that
Right.
you're going to have to battle through for 4 years, to get into the residency that you're going to have to get overwhelmed in for 3 to 7 years before you get to do the job that you finally get to do. It's not a lack of resilience. And yet so much of the focus was on how do we help make people more resilient. The problem
Right.
isn't the worker. The problem is the workplace. It's so chaotic. It's designed for highly functioning people to fail unless they're hyper vigilant constantly. And we can
No
be
big
hyper
deal. I think
vigilant.
about that too.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think about
Yeah.
that too in terms of like my life, because people, because my kid's dad passed away and people are
Yes.
always like, you're very strong. And it's the same message, like in healthcare, like they're so resilient, like build that, like, yeah, I am. And you know what? That's not my favorite thing about me. Like
Right. Right.
I would rather not have been through some of the things that I've been through.
Yeah.
And I think healthcare can relate to that. Like, sure, you can be resilient, and like for me, yoga does help, but you know what else helps? Like not being completely overwhelmed about my life all the time. Like knowing what is happening with childcare helps, like knowing all those other things. And when,
Yes.
some people listening might think, oh, well, these resilience workshops, like, not that we don't love learning modules, but I don't want to be strong. And physicians shouldn't have to be heroes. They shouldn't have to be super good at managing everything. Not saying that they aren't, but
Right.
it's unreasonable to say that to them.
Exactly.
Like I get really a little bit into this topic because I've lived it personally when people
Yes.
minimize your experience and they try to minimize their own responsibility
Mm-hmm.
through saying that. And with grief, sometimes it's understandable because they can't do anything to help me. They can't bring someone back from the dead.
Right.
So
Right.
in healthcare, I think a lot of the times we've been conditioned to say, oh, well, you're doing great. But some of what's included in that message is, I can't do anything to fix this, so we're going to push it back. And I like what you're saying, where you can actually fix it.
Right. Right.
Some in the nonprofit too, like we kind of work with both sides and telling physicians like it's okay to be strong, and here's some tools that you have, and here's some practical things, but also you have to work with both. So
yeah.
I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. No, and it's so there is this whole the issue of the culture of the organization or the unit you're working in has a big impact along those lines as well.
Yeah, because if you work with a bunch of assholes,
yeah,
job's gonna suck. Sorry,
right.
Like,
Oh no,
there's all those memes that are like, if you're burned out, maybe look around, because some of the people in healthcare and some of the people involved in burnout, you're going to be working with jerks. And
it's one of the first lessons I learned when I went into consulting, this consulting group Simpler that I joined, they sent me to this meeting called the Association for Manufacturing Excellence, and it's a bunch, and I thought, no, wait a minute, why are they sending me there? I'm in healthcare. I'm in this noble profession. This AME, these are people that make garage doors and widgets and axles and stuff like that. What am I going to learn from them?
And you learn that healthcare sometimes treats people like widgets.
Well, worse than that, actually. I went to this one breakout session led by Bob Chapman. Bob is an amazing person. I don't know if you've heard of him. He runs a company.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he runs a company called Barry Waymiller. They make heavy manufacturing equipment like bottle washers for Budweiser and stuff like that. They have a more empathetic and supportive culture than any healthcare system I've ever been in. And this is not just in his one office in St. Louis where he started this approach, but this is across 80 plants in 17 countries around the world with 12,000 employees. I mean, they've spread this whole philosophy, and his philosophy is he's written a book about it called Everybody Matters: The Amazing Power of Treating Your People Like Family. And
Oh, that's why. So you recommended that book to me and I read it.
oh, good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I learned, I'd never really, I'd always in my heart kind of thought through these concepts, but I'd never really articulated them. And so Bob led this panel of 5 different CEOs from companies that had 50 employees to 50,000, all of whom were espousing this. And I came away from that realizing, in healthcare, we do have this noble mission. We care about our patients, but we are hard as heck on each other. We're toxic to each other. And, and it comes from our training where in the old school days, the professors thought you had to memorize everything. You're going to make a mistake if you don't know everything and have it in your head, back when there weren't computers and many other aids that could help us. And so it was, and the thought process was, if we just belittle people and intimidate them and bully them, then they will do the work it takes to get this knowledge in their heads and know how to do it right. And so there's this whole culture of bullying and it's just really an intimidation that's horrible in healthcare, that's very hard to break, but it needs to be broken. And Lean actually provided, what Bob found was, he got this concept of, I want to treat people well, and he figured out how to do it in his main office in St. Louis, but to spread it to across the world to so many places, he needed a system, a management system to do that. And that's where he found Lean as the management system, where it's got these 2 components of respect for people and continuously improving the workflow, but respect for people being the more important component of it, actually. Because once you respect and empower people, then they can do that workflow redesign much more effectively. And I found this connected to burnout, because I also got to meet and got to know actually fairly well Christina Maslach, who created the Maslach Burnout Inventory. And with she and her colleague Michael Leiter identified the 3 components of burnout: emotional exhaustion, cynicism or depersonalization, and this sense of inefficacy. But they also identified 6 drivers of burnout. And those are, the first one is work overload. We just have too much to do, particularly in healthcare. It's a chaotic, time pressured environment, and it's information overload as well. And so when we're overloaded, then we lose control, and loss of control is the second driver of burnout. And controls, like we've talked about, it's important to us. In fact, it's one of those intangible rewards we expect after we pay our dues by going through med school and residency. And in fact, insufficient reward is the third driver of burnout. If you don't get recognized for doing great work, then that just really bears down on you.
Talk to people about that too. Like, make sure you're getting enough money to make it worth it if you're mad at your job.
Yeah. Well, and certainly the money reward is important, but so are the other rewards: professional recognition, and just the ability to be around, to enjoy the people you work with. Doctors and nurses, they're great people. They're really fun to be with. Certainly back when we were in training, we had a lot of time to do that.
Yeah. No, I mean, they are. They're funny too.
Yeah. Community is breaking down, and breakdown of community is the 4th driver of burnout. When we're all stressed out and disconnected, we start to wonder if we're being treated fairly. Absence of fairness is the 5th driver of burnout. And particularly this day and age, as the workforce becomes more diverse, there are so many people in the workforce that just get treated unfairly multiple times a day through no fault of their own. And I'm not the best person to talk about this, because I'm an older white gentleman. I call myself a pale, stale male. Nobody's ever. I mean,
you are a little bit of a white dude. No offense.
Yeah. No,
white as a
I know. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
But
no, it's true though. This is something I actually realized more. My youngest is half Indian, and people make comments about it constantly. And I was like hypersensitive, and I still am. And I don't like talking about it, because I'm like, this isn't my message, and we don't need any more white women tears. But like, also, I had no idea. Like, I think a lot of the people who are in leadership, like you'll never experience what it's like to constantly have those comments.
Exactly. Exactly.
You just don't.
Right. And through no fault of, and you do it. So over half the physician workforce essentially now experiences it, because of things they have no control over: their gender, their skin color, their nation of origin, that, and it happens from superiors, it happens from colleagues, it happens from, from patients. And, I look back and I realize unintentionally, I've been guilty of this myself. With even with the best of intentions, I didn't understand. I was stupid. And so we all have to learn this, but it's a key factor. And then the The sixth and last driver of burnout is conflicting values. If my personal values don't align with the values of the organization I'm in, I start to wonder whether I'm in the right place. And what Maslow actually did then to identify is that work overload drives exhaustion, the exhaustion manifestation of burnout. And most people think that's what burnout is. I'm overloaded, I'm exhausted. And in fact, those other 5 drivers of burnout, control, reward, community, fairness, and values, those drive cynicism. And those actually have so much impact. You cannot be overloaded and be burned out because the place you work sucks. And so
I think that's important. Like the cynicism piece, because I talk to a lot of people, even people in healthcare, people in technology that are like, well, I don't know if I'll stay here forever. Like, I'm too cynical. And exhaustion itself, like it's not what pushes you up.
Yeah. And so when we think about that, and then we look at the Stanford professional fulfillment model with the 3 components of personal resilience, practice efficiency, and culture of wellness. The practice efficiency component is really addressed through that idea of work overload and exhaustion. And you can, as we improve workflows, we can reduce that work overload and exhaustion. We can regain work-life balance. But that culture of wellness component is actually where we see cynicism come out. And it's driven by those other things. And by changing the management approach, we can address things like control and reward and community fairness and values. And when we address those effectively, we drive engagement. And almost every health system is focused on employee engagement, but they're focused on it the wrong way. They're taking these surveys that ask if somebody's happy where they're working, or if they feel like their manager.
They're like, do you like your job, or do you maybe want to be fired or quit?
Yeah, management is doing the right things or whatever. They're not asking those questions about, do I have the appropriate level of control? Do I, am I recognized? Am I able to work with my colleagues? And by a lean management approach, actually, the management system part of it, and with the huddles and the alignment and all of that addresses that culture of wellness. So there's a way to methodically use this approach and actually make a workplace better. That's what I had done at Sutter Gould, where I was a CEO, although I hadn't really formulated these ideas as clearly as they are now. And that's the difference there, is that now I can, you can see when you put it all together that that's the way that works. And in fact, one of the things I've done, I've got a book about this book here, Preventing Physician Burnout.
But I was about to say, you should tell people how to reach you, and we can discuss more of the specific ideas again,
Yeah. And there's actually a chapter in there called Lean Done Right, which talks about it. But we go through, I was very fortunate. I worked with a fantastic co-author, Diane Shannon, who's also going to be she's going to be presenting at the conference coming up in January as well. But so we put together these concepts, a lot of focus on what's driving burnout. 2/3 of the book is what's driving burnout. What are the core root drivers in healthcare, so people could really understand them? And then they can apply those concepts to their particular situation. But we also do discuss lean, because so many people think lean is top down and actually makes things worse. It has to be done right, which is what we talk about in one chapter. We give vignettes about what organizations have done that have worked well. And we give guidance for frontline clinicians, for senior leaders, and for board members about what their roles that they should play as well. So, but it has come together for me in ways that I never expected, that indeed the basic concept that if we recognize and honor people and treat them well and give them the mechanisms by which they can improve their work, that they then become empowered and they are aligned, and we address, the system can succeed while individuals succeed also. But
like that.
so many top level leaders do not yet understand this, and it's kind of threatening. I mean, C-level leader, you've worked for 20 or 30 years to get to that position. You've succeeded doing things the way you've done them. And now somebody like me comes along and says, no, do it a different way. You got to do it all differently. Not too many people. That's a hard sell. But those who listen, those who do it, it is transformative. These are the people who will succeed, because now, the pandemic's come along. It was a personal existential threat to everyone from the infection. It's a systemic existential threat as clinicians are leaving the healthcare workforce. Those places that create a place that clinicians
I mean, like
want
you
to
were
work,
saying, like they're treated better in manufacturing.
yeah.
No?
You know, I'll go to a place I want to work. I'm not going to keep living in a toxic environment.
Right.
So if you can, as a leader, create the place that people want to come to work, your organization is going to be successful. And if you don't, if you continue the old way, your organization is not going to last another 5 to 10 years. And you have this opportunity if you are willing to make this change. Just like we do in healthcare, we change care plans all the time. As we learn more, we learn how to do things better. We're learning now how to do management better. The people, and it's essentially management malpractice to practice in the old top-down command and control way, creating a toxic environment for the people who are working in it, when there is a different way and things can be done better. And this is the if there's one message, it's the most important person to fix burnout in a healthcare system is the CEO, who adopts this and then leads that transformation.
Well, thank you. And we'll include like ways for people to get in touch with you and a link to the book. I think that I really like that thought, like everyone matters.
Yeah, everybody
Later
matters.
we'll have to meet again and we can talk about the most important person is the CEO. I don't know about that.
Well, if you're going to transform the entire organization, absolutely, but it takes that CEO has to change. They have to really change.
Right.
So
yeah. And if they don't, like, I think you're right that it's a workforce problem and they'll be replaced. Like,
yeah.
More people will leave healthcare. I don't know if we've reached that crisis point yet, but there are people like me who hope things will change to the point where we're watching to see, like, is this going to be the point in which people are forced to change?
Yeah.
Or are they going to voluntarily become better? And that's really the choice we're faced with now. Like, are you going, and I think I think leaders too are overwhelmed. Like, are you going to voluntarily make those changes or not?
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to being together in person at the end of January for the conference.
Yeah, so we're going to be at the Physician Burnout Symposium, and I will include ways to get a hold of Dr. DeChant.